Yeah. So we've got Heidi and Adam and myself here, and all of you guys. And Amy Ivy has graciously agreed to co-host this for us today and teach us all something about some gardening. I think that you're gonna really concentrate on the containers and planters and window boxes and anything else that you guys come up with for questions. I think Amy really has a lot of knowledge and is happy to help us. This is her expertise, and she is a horticulturist, right?
Mhm.
Yep. And so I will let you take it away from there. But just a couple quick notes. We cannot use a chat function. This is being recorded for compliance purposes, and it's something that we hope to do on a weekly basis. So we would love to hear feedback on what you guys would like to see going forward. And take it away. And Adam, do you have anything to add to that?
No, just again, thank you to Amy for being our first guest host for this.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. Thanks for asking me. So yeah, I'm happy to do this. I'm looking forward to it. One disclaimer I have to give is I'm at home with my kind of slightly wonky Wi-Fi. So every now and then for me, the audio will freeze up. So if I look kind of funny, like while you were talking a second ago, Christina, it did do that, but usually it's only for a second or two. So if I miss something, it's because it kind of froze for a sec. So I'm hopeful we'll be just fine. That won't be any problem. But we shall see. So what I thought I would do, you all, is, we want to make this as discussion oriented as possible, but I thought it would be good to kick it off with I have like 10 minutes to just kind of go through the basics of growing in containers. And so it probably would I think the best way to have the conversation part happen is let me just get through this so that I can make the key points I want to make, and then maybe you could make a note to yourself or mental thing, like what do you want to know more about? Because I don't know which aspect is of the most interest to you all. So I'm going to hit some key points, and then we'll go right back to what you want to know more in depth about. Does that sound like a good plan for everybody? You all okay with that? Okay, great. I'll try not to, hang on. I'm just going to share my screen here real quick so you can see the slides, right, Christina? Okay, cool. All right. Oh, and should I hit mute all at this point? That might be a good thing. Or did you already do that, Christina? You must have, because you're muted. Okay, I'm going to carry on here. Hang on, I'm just going to make all your images as small as possible. There we go. Okay, so some basics for gardening in containers. So window boxes are probably the classic thing, that's been around the longest. And certainly we can all, imagine these wonderful Swiss houses with their, gorgeous window boxes. Here's a more modern looking kind of style of a window box. And then it's just amazing how much stuff you can grow in window boxes like that. And it's kind of fun because if you don't, like you can see here, there's no place for soil, so they can still have all these gorgeous plants without even having any place to, any ground to plant them in. And so hanging baskets are one sort of a classic kind of, so these are all window boxes. So it's like a rectangle, filled with soil. It's got a little more volume, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then there's window hanging baskets like this that have a smaller size container, and they're so pretty. We definitely want to come back to this topic because I know a lot of folks get them at Mother's Day, and they're just irresistible at the greenhouses. And we usually get a lot of questions about how to keep them looking their best. There's a lot to talk about with them. It's a huge challenge because they are maxed out, full on production in a relatively small pot, and it's really hard to keep that going. So we'll talk about that. One of the things I wanted to mention too is all the different kinds of containers you can use. You could really use your imagination. If you can be as simple as a recycled whiskey barrel. For a while, these were really popular, and you'd see them stacked up, all over the, every garden center kind of place would have them. I don't see them quite as much, but they're all kinds of nice. They look like ceramic, but they're actually heavy plastic, which is really nice for a lot of us because they're lighter weight and easier to move around than something heavy in ceramic. These are absolutely gorgeous. They're all different kinds now of these beautiful glazed urns. There is a concern, you have to be careful over the winter so they don't crack. So the plastic is more flexible, and so it won't crack from the cold the way an urn would. These are just flue tiles, ceramic construction flue tiles that you can plant in. And then there are some nice concrete, poured concrete kind of containers that can be really nice too. And then crazy stuff too. Some people really delight in finding oddball stuff like bathtubs. I've seen plants planted in shoes, old boots, all kinds of stuff. You can actually, if it all depends, it's up to you what you like the look of. There's some key elements though to any container, regardless of whether it's a recycled thing or something that you bought. And we'll get into that in particular too. But what I like about the containers, as I mentioned with the window boxes too, is you don't have to dig in the ground in order to have a pretty extensive garden for your patio or your back porch or that kind of a thing. You can see some examples. This is a big kale plant growing in this one here. It's just beautiful anyway, but there's really a lot of different options that they give you. But it's so important to address the drainage. That's probably one of the most important aspects, especially when you get into the pretty ones. Obviously, a whiskey barrel has a lot of drainage, but some of those glazed ones may not have holes in the bottom for drainage. And so you definitely want to make sure before you fill it out that you've got some nice big drain holes too, not just little, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, drilled holes. You need big holes, like an inch big around, so the water will drain through. If the hole's too small, the water won't leave. The capillary action is too tight and the water won't drain down through. You can see the size of the holes in these pots here. You can put, if you have an urn that doesn't have drainage, you can put a plastic pot inside of it so that you can't see the plastic pot. And that's a really nice way to handle that situation too. If you have something on your deck, if you put some kind of foot underneath it, it'll help increase the drainage. Plus, it will also help if it's a wooden deck. It will help with the moisture that will accumulate under there. It'll help let some air come under there and dry it out so that it doesn't rot. Doesn't rot away your deck. And then it also allows for that drainage. So that can really be helpful. My father-in-law was a big-time gardener, and later on in life, he wasn't able to get up and down the stairs to get out to the backyard so easily. So he used big whiskey barrels, but he had them on a roller, kind of like this. And because he had a big deck and a big tree, and he would chase the sun as the sun moved across the deck during the day. He would just pull his planters across the deck so they were always in as much sun as possible, which was really a neat way for him to address his partly shady situation there. And for other folks, just having them on the wheels might make it easier to work with them or to, get them out of the way or whatever. So because they get heavy when they are wet, especially if they're ceramic, can get very heavy. But then the other extreme is when they dry out, and because especially hanging baskets, because they're hanging up there and they're blowing in the wind, and there are a lot of leaves and a small root area, so they are very prone to drying out. So you have to be super careful with that, and so stay on top of that as well. And this is another topic I want to come back to in depth, because everybody always says, how do I know, how much do I water? How often do I have to water? So I want to come back to that topic, because that's another critical topic to go into more depth on. As I say, I just want to get these points out here, and then we can see which of these points are the ones that are of most interest to you all. So because they're hanging up and they're above the ground, or even just a pot that's above the ground, it is going to dry out more quickly than what you might be used to. If you have been used to growing in the ground, you can go a lot longer between watering when they're in the ground. Having like one of those beautiful window boxes I showed you, or definitely the hanging baskets where they're just crammed full of plants, they're going to drink up that water really quickly. Like most hanging baskets need a soak every single day, most of the time. And then I also want to talk more about, if you're going to make your own, pot up your own, which is really fun to do, what to put in that pot, what kind of mix to put in the pot. So we can come back to that as well. So you see, there's so much to talk about. That's the hard part with anything related to gardening. There's always so many tips and, you know, details to give. But basically you want the mix should be lightweight. Don't just dig up soil from your yard and put it in the pot. The smaller the pot, the lighter the soil. And by light, I mean more peat moss in it. And, you know, the bag that you buy actually feels light. It's not dense and heavy like a bag of soil would be. And so, you know, there's all kinds of mixes that are ready to go on a small scale, and you can just fill your pots up with that. You know, places like Cook and Gardner have a whole range of wonderful, ready to go mixes you can just put right in your pots. If you have a big pot, like a really big, or one of those big long, like that long one you saw that went along the edge of a deck that has a lot of volume to it, then maybe you want to mix some potting, some other stuff in it. You could add, we'll talk more about that if you want to know more about that. Fertilizing is going to be essential because they, especially if you're using all potting mix, because that doesn't have any nutrient in it. Check the bag though if you are buying it, because now more and more of the mixes are coming with fertilizer added into it. But they will use that up quickly because they're crowded in there. They're growing closer than they would be if you had them in the yard, you know, in the ground. And so they're hungry and they're growing a lot, and you want them to be gorgeous. So you do fertilize these more than you would fertilize something that's growing in the ground. And we can talk more about what to use and that kind of a thing too. That's another topic we can go into more. There's a lot of them. I just wanted to mention briefly the kinds of things people put in them. I'm not going to go into detail here, but mostly to show you some pretty pictures. So you really can put anything in these planters. It's really up to your personal interest. You can just use a regular, you know, common bedding plants. I love petunias them because they, you know, drape over the side, and there are all kinds of new things out there now and fancy stuff, but just to kind of give you an idea. And Angelonia is a neat one if you want something taller. That's kind of a really nice one that blooms for quite a while. That's a neat one. You have to buy that. It usually comes in like a 3 or 4 inch pot. And then some oddball, not oddball, but just more unusual things can be put in there as well. So I just kind of threw out some examples there of some things. You want it to be something that's going to look good for a long period of time, you know, be in bloom for a long time, since that's, you know, we're really pushing, we want to show. And one of the things I love are this is mostly coleus. All these are coleus on top, and the bottom two here are sweet potato vines. There's the chartreuse and then that purplish one. So you can get all kinds of different colors, and then they'll have that color all the time. So it's like instant color, steady color.
Loud enough.
So it's a nice one too.
I'm going to Ivy talking about these flowers.
There, there we go. And so I love using foliage to add that color that's so steady all the time. Also consider the texture of the leaves, like that great big kale. That's that same picture again with the big, huge leaves. You can really get creative, or real fine, feathery things. It's really, it's so much fun to do what you want to do with it. Oopsie, hang on a second here. And this is a really neat, what do you call it, a mnemonic, a trick to, if you want to make your own basket, you want to use a thriller, which is like a bold feature plant. And then a spiller is one that will drape over the side of the plant, of the pot. And then a filler is something that will just get nice and bushy and kind of fill in the gaps. So if you address all 3 of those aspects, then you'll guaranteed to have a beautiful looking planter. You can definitely grow vegetables in these. Now, most vegetables need full sun, so you are going to want to think about that. Something like lettuce, if it's just leafy greens, it doesn't need as much sun. But if you want to grow a tomato, it's perfectly doable in a pot. But you want to make sure you do have that in full sun. And you want to match the pot to the plant. So, you know, lettuce can be grown in a shallow, even just a simple little window box, you know, like a little 6 by 8 inch window box that might be 2 feet long, or they come in different lengths. You could easily grow lettuce, parsley, you know, basil, all kinds. But if you want something big, like a tomato or cucumber, or, you know, something that's a bigger plant, it needs to have more volume for its roots in order to produce that crop that you want. Because if they're too crowded, they just aren't going to, you know, you want a ripe tomato out of that. So you need to give it the room that it wants. And that's the end of what I had that I wanted to get across to you all. So now I will I think I might keep my my slides up just so I can access them again in case I need to illustrate something for you all. I'm just trying to make it so I can see. I want to do gallery view, I think. No, I'm trying to make it so I can see all your faces again. I have you all shrunk down. There. Okay, so you all can, you can unmute yourselves if you have a question. How about if you don't have a question, keep yourself muted, just because you'd be surprised how background noise and paper rustling makes a lot of noise. So
thank you, Amy. I was writing furiously because I pretty much had a question from every page, but since this isn't for me, we'll open it up to everybody else. And hi, Brenda, I saw you come in a few minutes late. Welcome to our little party here. And who would like to kick us off with a question for Amy? Anybody brave enough?
And don't forget to unmute. You have to unmute yourselves.
Anybody?
At bottom corner.
Loris is talking, but she's muted.
Yes.
Dolores, you want to unmute yourself? Let's
hear you.
Bottom, Dolores, bottom
left. For me, it's the left, right?
left.
Look for a little microphone, and it'll have a red line through it. And just click on it, and the red line should go away.
No, it's still there. Hold on. So on your iPad,
Can't mute.
Do you see a microphone, Dolores, on your iPad? Or a picture of a microphone?
Oh, yeah, let me just technology. No, yeah, I can't. Yeah, it's not letting me. It won't let me I can't. Oopsie, I can't unmute her. I'm sorry, Dolores.
All right, keep on trying to find that mute button to unmute yourself. And does somebody else have a question while we're waiting here?
Oh, I do.
Linda, go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, my question was, with the hanging basket, oftentimes in the middle of the summer, it gets so straggly, and even though, you know, you've watered, you've fertilized and everything, is it all right to cut them all the way back and start all over again?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things you can do with that. Yeah, that's what we call giving it a haircut. And a couple of things. If you had a nice big container and the roots had plenty of room to grow, like this planter here, or this one here, you could totally give that what we call a haircut. You could prune it way back quite hard, and if it's petunias, they really love it. It'll really invigorate them, and they will flower more, and they'll regrow, and it'll be great. So definitely it's worth doing. You want to, after you cut it back hard, you want to then give it, I would give it a shot of something liquid like Miracle-Gro, so it has an instant blast of fertilizer, and then just really keep on top of the watering, and it should be great. What's hard is when you have planters like these that are so gorgeous, but there's just they are at maximum beauty right here. If you cut those back, they're just going to give up, unfortunately, because this kind of hanging basket, is to enjoy in the moment, and maybe it'll last a month, maybe it'll last 6 weeks, but it is not going to look like this in August. It's just no way. Now this one here, sometimes in the cities, you know, they'll plant them and they'll be huge. The actual, you can't tell by the scale here, but the actual basket may be like 2 feet across, and then that one should keep going. But these little ones here, where it's an 8 or 10 inch pot, there's a limited amount of cutting back you can do.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So Amy, and following up with that real quick, can somebody replant from the smaller basket to something else, or will it kill it?
Yeah, no, that's actually a really neat thing to do. You could buy one of those gorgeous hanging baskets, you know, at Mother's Day, because somebody else thought about it and put together a beautiful combination. And then you could just take it out of that pot and put it into something big like that, or a nice big planter, or even one of these big urns, and just lift the whole thing out probably need to take the hanger off so you can get it out. Lift the whole thing out as is, and then just plant the whole thing into a nice big pot, and then it should be great. And then you should be able to have no problem with cutting it back to keep it, giving it that haircut to keep it nice and full. It looks like somebody brought her houseplant over to ask a question about.
Oh, Jean. Jean, do you want to take a question, or do you want to ask a question? I should say?
Behind the plant.
Just want to know if there's any hope for this plant. I think I've been overwatering. I don't know.
Yeah, okay, so the thing about overwatering, where's my drainage picture? Okay, so the problem with overwatering, so this applies to houseplants, anything that's in a container. What happens it's always better to underwater, let the plant wilt a little bit, and then water it, because what happens when you overwater, which happens when the soil stays too wet, the soil's wet, the roots die because they suffocate, they literally drown without enough oxygen around them. And then the plant starts to wilt because its roots are dead, and you go, oh no, the plant is wilting, I'll give it some more water. And it gives you the wrong signal. So then it perpetuates itself. But because the roots have died, the recovery from overwatering is very bleak. You can try. In your case, I would definitely check the drainage and stuff like that. So when you can, it's better to make sure you got plenty of drainage, and then water it really, when you water any of it, water it really well. And with a big pot like this, it's hard to get the whole area soaked. You can't just put a little cup of water on top and keep the surface wet. You really need to get it soaked down through, and then don't water again until it needs it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dolores, any luck with your iPad and the muting?
No.
Not able to find it yet? Okay, all right. Brenda, did you have a question? You want to unmute yourself too, please. Oh, Brenda, can you unmute yourself, please?
We can't hear you. Sorry.
Brenda, do you have a mute button on your computer?
It's so weird. I wish.
There she goes. She got it.
Oh, all right.
There
My
you are.
question is technical. I don't have my computer turned up loud enough. Can I leave you and get back in? Okay.
Yep.
All right. I'll be back.
It'll let you back in. It's no problem.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Actually, I have a quick question. Since you're on this slide, Amy, and you're talking about the kind of tall planters, it's hard to get enough water in there.
Mm-hmm.
Does that, if you have a tall one, does the whole thing have to be all soil? I mean, it's got to weigh a ton, or is there something you can kind of like maybe put rocks in the bottom or something?
Excellent question. I was hoping somebody would ask that. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, you can put stuff in the bottom, and definitely do that, because you'll never be able to afford, that it's hard to provide that much soil. And then also it gets kind of funky, because that bottom half of the pot doesn't really get used. So the soil is just kind of weird down there. So by all means do that. And even with the whiskey barrels, even something as like that you can do too. And so there are a couple of things. I don't know about rocks. The very best thing would be, if you ever got I don't know what it would be. I keep meaning to save this stuff. That rigid, hard styrofoam that comes in like a packing, like if you get an appliance or something, or you know what I mean? And it's that really hard because it won't compress. That's great because it's light and it just takes up space. I've seen people take a big soda bottles and just put the cap on them, so it's just a thing of air. You could probably do it with a laundry jug too. Anything that will take up space without adding weight would be a great thing to do. Yeah.
Okay. And I was going to say, Dolores, if you want to email me your question, I'd be happy to ask Amy for you if you can't figure out
that's a good idea.
muting.
That's a good workaround.
Well, Heidi, I think that you had a question.
I have millions of questions.
See, that's me.
I'll make it quick. It had to do with your discussion of using these concrete pots.
Mm-hmm.
I was always a little bit afraid of toxicity with concrete as well as them prematurely drying out because concrete tends to wick the moisture.
Yeah, that's
As well as pressure treated, the newer pressure treated toxicity. Can you address toxicity with containers and planters?
yeah. So what we do to be on, supposedly the new pressure treated products are that they don't leach. They're they don't move in the soil, but I would still want to be careful if I had it like on my deck or something. So there are a couple ways around that. You could either line, you could use a big plastic pot. So let's say this happened to be a pressure treated pot, and you could take one of these plastic pots and just stick it inside, as long as the roots don't come into contact with the pressure treated material, then you could be 100% sure that it's safe. So that's one way to do it. Some people have lined it with like a heavy garbage bag and then put the mix in, again, to make that barrier between the roots and the pressure treated. And then the concrete, I'm not worried about the concrete for leaching out like lime or something like that, but it's true that the concrete, and then also the ceramic, the regular old ceramic, the pots that this is supposed to look like, ceramic pots, right? They breathe. And so they will actually, if it doesn't make you guys all too dizzy, I did put a couple slides at the very end in case this question came up, because I thought it might. This is really typical to see. This is the salt from the fertilizer that has leached through the wall of this pot and accumulates on the outside. So you can see that it is porous. So it's fine because it does let the roots breathe a little better. But it will dry out more quickly. So this kind of pot is fine to use, but it will dry out more quickly than would a plastic pot.
That question was so advanced, I didn't even know that could be a problem.
We get that question a lot with people build raised beds, which we'll talk about next week. A lot of people build a raised bed out of pressure treated lumber and then go, oh, wait a minute, I was going to grow vegetables in there. Now what do I do? So we get that question a lot.
Gotcha. Anybody else with a question? Hi, Bev. I didn't see you earlier. Welcome to our group here. Do you have a question for Amy? No? Okay. Well, then I will ask one of my questions. Amy, you were showing a few with a plate underneath the pot, but then you were talking about, having enough places for the water to go down into the roots and everything. Does the plate inhibit whatever's supposed to happen? I don't even know how to ask the question correctly, but is the plate okay, or does that do something that you don't really want to happen?
It's fine. I would just keep an eye on it. The technical term is a saucer. Sorry, Christina. Okay. So the saucer. If it's outside where it's going to get rained on, you just want to keep an eye on it, because that saucer is going to fill with rainwater and it will cause the plant to become overwatered. It will inhibit that drainage. So if you do want to use a saucer under your pot on a porch, you do want to keep an eye on that and keep dumping it out. So it's kind of a pain in the neck. But I think people use the saucer on the deck because they're afraid it's going to hurt the wood. So I would rather that you put it up on feet so that the water could drain through, and it would help your deck and it would help the pot. A saucer is better to use maybe like on a screened-in porch or someplace where you didn't want the water to drain, right onto the ground below, onto the material below it. So outdoors, I would rather not. I personally wouldn't use the saucer and just use it indoors.
Okay. And then for those of us that go away for a week at a time,
yes.
How do you deal with that, and how often are you supposed to water?
Yeah, so that's the $1 million question.
Ooh. Did I lose you?
I have found that the bigger the pot, the slower it dries out. And so what I would do is kind of monitor, before you go on your trip, figure out how often you're watering. And of course, as the summer goes on, you're going to water more often because the plants are bigger and they will have filled, up most of the root space. So they're probably going to need more water, but take a look for yourself. Certainly a hanging basket. I'm trying to find a good picture. Here we go. Certainly a hanging basket would most likely need water every single day. And so if you have, a lot of people have porches with those gorgeous hanging baskets all the way down them, you need to basically hire someone to come to your house every day and water them. Because if you've been watering every day and you suddenly don't water, then you're going to come back to a dead plant. It's just, you just have to do something. Or it being a hanging basket, maybe you could take it to a friend's house and they could water it. It'd be easier for them. They wouldn't have to keep coming over to your house that way. But if you have a bigger pot, like, a bigger one like that, you can probably get away, and you'll just have to see, because it depends on the material you filled it with and all that kind of, and whether it's in a hot, sunny spot or a shady spot. I would also pull it to out of the sun if you could. If it's like right on a blasting hot location, while you're away, pull it off to the side. It won't dry out quite so quickly. And then, how often was the others? So today, those both of them. And then something like this, when they get this full, you can see how full it is. It all depends. Some people will put a plastic liner, especially if it's a wooden box, just to keep it healthy, keep the wood better, because it does, get wet and weep through. Like you can see this is kind of weathered. And so something that had a nice finish like this, you might want to line it with like a plastic window box type thing you can get at, like Lowe's and places like that. So that might dry out more quickly because it's slightly smaller root volume. So you're just going to kind of have to see. But yeah, definitely make plans. Don't just go on vacation and leave your beautiful plants.
Right, that's why I don't have plants, not because I would kill them.
Right, yeah, right. they are a responsibility, I know.
So we are about 30 minutes in from the beginning. I don't know if anybody has one last question that they would like to ask Amy. I know that this is a wide range topic and we could probably spend hours here doing this. Does anybody have one last question? Okay.
That's one lady, I don't know your names. I don't see your name next to you, but somebody's trying to talk and it's
Brenda. Go ahead.
Thank you. You may have answered this before I came on, but watering, I've been saying to my husband, he's doing the watering, go down at least 2 inches and feel if it's wet there. Is that kind of a rule of thumb or not?
Yes, stick your finger right in. It doesn't do any good just to look at the surface and see if it looks damp on top. You got to go down where the roots are. I would go even deeper.
Oh, that's what I wondered.
Yeah, as much as you can kind of heft the pot. If it's a small enough planter, you can kind of heft it a little bit, kind of lift up by the corner and just kind of see how heavy it feels. That can be an indication too if you need it. But yeah, when in doubt, you got to poke down there. But yeah, it's the roots you're watering, so you want to make. That's what I'm saying about soaking it, because it can be really hard with a large volume to really get the water to move down. And because these mixes are so often peat. Dominantly peat moss. Peat moss is the weirdest stuff. When it gets dry, it actually gets hydrophobic. It's hard to re-wet it again. So sometimes you add water if you let it get too dry and you add water, it's like the water just runs off and kind of runs down the sides and doesn't move through. So yeah, you definitely want to look and feel and poke and make sure you're getting it nice and wet.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right.
My parting message is, if you have more questions, Cornell Cooperative Extension and the Master Gardener Program is a wonderful resource to you all. Linda Mott is a Master Gardener volunteer with the group. And even though the office is closed, I understand that they're still fielding questions. Jolene Wallace is the employee who coordinates the volunteers. And maybe I can give you her email address or something. Actually, if you don't mind, let me just take 1 second and I'll just read it to you. Do you know it offhand, Linda? It's JMW. I just forget the numbers. I've got it right here. If you hang on, I should have had it ready. Let's see if we can have it on record. Here it is, jmw442@cornell.edu, like education. And you can email Jolene, and she knows she's wonderful. So she's a wonderful resource for you all for further information on all this stuff. Right, Linda?
All right. Well, thank you, Amy, very much for sharing all of that information today. And I personally am excited to hear about the raised beds next week. And if anybody has other questions that they'd like to submit ahead of time, I just email either Heidi, Adam, or myself, and we'd be happy to pass them on. And it is wonderful seeing some of you that we have not seen in months, and screens for others. And I will say thank you all for attending. Amy, really thank you for your time today. It's greatly appreciated for you to share all of that with us. And the pictures are beautiful. Are those all yours?
Oh, yeah, right. I wish. I don't think there's a single one here that's mine. Usually I'm in somewhere or another, but no, those are, nope. Thank you, Internet. And then also a coworker, a guy at Cornell, had put this together. So these are, some of these pictures are Charlie Mazza's.
Oh, okay. Adam?
Again, just thank you to Amy, and some really great tips that everybody can probably take home at least one of those, I think, and it might make your thumb a little more green. I know me. I asked my question just because I was like, this can't be how you do this. Not everyone has to be doing this way. So you definitely made my life a little bit easier. So thank you.
Good. See you.
Amy, I appreciate your knowledge. I love gardening, and there's so much I need to learn.
And I'm still learning too, Heidi. You never stop learning. That's why it's so much fun. And so many people are getting into gardening now. I can't believe how it's so exciting. Yeah, so next week we're probably going to be a little more focused on vegetables, being raised beds, but you can grow, I put tons of flowers in my raised beds, zinnias and all kinds of stuff in my raised beds too, but such an interest in vegetable growing now. So we'll have a little more slant towards vegetables next week, I think.